Really what holistic means is looking at yourself as a whole and understanding how the different parts of you impact other parts of yourself. So how your career impacts your mood, impacts your quality of life, how your emotions can manifest in other areas. I was trying to fit like a full-time career in a very, very, very part-time time frame and ended up burning myself out. Adrenal fatigue, it's basically a physiological response to unbearable stress. I was, and this is not to like blame anybody who's going through that. We go through when you know better, you do better kind of thing.
Going through this burnout and kind of reevaluation of like your life and what you potentially needed to change.
I really prioritized the restoration time, and I learned to trust what my body was leading me to do.
The ability to make choices and do things that can really help your body function.
Right. It's so powerful. And I often tell the women I work with, feeling better is a lot closer than you think it is.
Hello, and welcome to Soul Aligned CEO Podcast, the show that shares the journeys of entrepreneurs from all around the world who have started businesses and they are doing that soul aligned. I'm your host, Jenny Maury. And on today's episode, I am so excited to welcome Maura Eliza. She is the CEO of Flex Health with Maura. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So I thought if we could first start by having you share with everyone a little bit about what you offer.
Yeah, so I am a traditional naturopath, and my specialty and my passion is helping people understand how their bodies work, especially in terms of reframing the term holistic. So a lot of people will hear holistic and maybe, first thing is, oh, that is for me. Oh, that's not for me, because they're thinking that it's about supplements and herbs and chiropractors. But really and it can include those things, but really what holistic means is looking at yourself as a whole and understanding how the different parts of you impact other parts of yourself. So how your career impacts your mood, impacts your quality of life, how your emotions can manifest in other areas, this kind of integration and interplay with all of the different parts of your body and helping people explore and understand that.
That's fantastic. I am so excited to talk with you more about all of that today, because I think it's something, that everybody can learn a little bit more about. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about Maura's background. She started out as a music therapist, and she has had a really expansive entrepreneurship journey. So I'm excited to get into that. And then we are also going to talk about her own experience with adrenal fatigue and how she really works to get to the root cause of that and really help heal her own self. Mm-hmm. We're also going to discuss the basics of what is adrenal fatigue. I know we hear that term often these days, and so really want to just share some basic information and really understand how stress really impacts your nervous system and your adrenals. And then at the end, I'm really excited because Maura is going to share with us some common mistakes that people often make when they are looking to try to increase their energy. And then she's going to share with us some practical tips on how to, really get to the root of that exhaustion. So I do just want to say, because of the nature of the topics that we are discussing today, that none of this is medical advice, and to always make sure you contact your own practitioner. All right, so let's get started with your background then. And so why don't you share a little bit about kind of where you started professionally?
Yeah, so I started as a music therapist. I have a degree in music therapy and was in a career, and also had grown up in a culture in my home where it was kind of a very employee mindset. So, but in this case, I was a contractor, and I never thought about it until, it was like sent to me by the universe. I never thought about there was no way to make six figures. There was no way that you were always in that field. You were always going to just be the music therapist, going to homes, going to schools, and it was something I really didn't think about until I wasn't looking for another opportunity, but I just happened to come across an opportunity to start my own agency doing something that nobody else was doing. Like I was doing music therapy assisted childbirth. So marrying doula work with music therapy. And originally I got the training thinking, oh, I'll go work for somebody doing this, but there was nobody to work for.
Okay. You had
So
to kind of forge your own path.
yes, exactly. And start thinking about things that I didn't even realize I wasn't thinking about before. So there was a lot of personal growth in that, a lot of going back and learning, becoming aware of things that belief systems that I didn't realize that I even had. And at that time, direct sales was introduced to me too. And I was just like really opening up and really expanding. So prior to that, I probably would have poo-pooed the whole concept. But when I stopped and listened to it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a totally different way of making money and of thinking about making money. And then I set off to trying to make that happen.
So then you were having that realization that there were many different ways to earn an income. How did that really impact the trajectory of what you were doing professionally?
Well, I would say I probably made all the mistakes of trying to do all the ways and got myself too busy, too many irons in the fire, too many things going on, not enough time. I had young children at the time as well. And I was trying to fit like a full-time career in a very, very, very part-time time frame and ended up burning myself out. And so that was my first experience with adrenal fatigue, was that I got that diagnosis from a chiropractor. I hadn't really never heard of it before. And she gave me a basic definition and understanding of it. But at the time I was thinking, well, yeah, but I can't change any of these things. I couldn't change the age of my children. I couldn't change what I needed to do to try to build this career. And so I didn't. And I ended up, waking up with panic attacks in the morning. And ultimately I lost everything that I had been like clinging to keep afloat and keep going. And so, looking back now, several years out of it, I'm kind of glad that I had that experience because I could see I ended up having adrenal fatigue again, actually just within the last year, and was able to totally change everything and not approach it in the same way. And then I could also recognize in the women around me the same things that they were doing and be able to help them really make some changes as well.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the first time and what you were experiencing, because I think that culmination of all those different aspects of your life and kind of everything coming together, that burnout is something that I think many, especially in Western society, experience these days. So let's talk just a little bit more about like, where does that come from? Like all of the things that you were kind of trying to do and experiencing, how did that build up to get you to that burnout?
Yeah. So if you can summarize adrenal fatigue, it's basically a physiological response to unbearable stress. I was, and this is not to like blame anybody who's going through that. We go through, when you know better, you do better kind of thing. But I was able, when I look back, I'm like, I was creating so much stress for myself. The stress to be, this great mother and this really successful entrepreneur and the wife and the friend and eat really healthfully and all of these things. It was just really way too much. I wasn't giving myself any respite time, any time to recover or restore. It was just like go, go, go all the time. Young children can be noisy and explosive, and like you don't always know what you're gonna get. If they get tired, then there's a tantrum. There's so many things outside of my control, but I also just didn't have the personal reserves anymore to be able to handle those kinds of things. So I wasn't taking time for myself. I was, in a sense, always looking outside for the solution to help me, whether that be from encouragement from my husband at the time, to take care of myself, or a supplement or a workout or more restrictive eating. I kept trying to go back to those things, like, oh, maybe if I could just be consistent with taking these supplements, or I need to walk the dog twice a day, or I had some dairy, so that must be why I'm feeling like, this. And it was none of none of those things. Those can play a role, but later on, I ended up closing that business. I'm obviously not doing music therapy work anymore. And I had to just emotionally and physically recover from even wanting to have a business again. And I was just like, forget this for many years. I just I just needed to let that whole idea go. But it kind of came back to me when a mentor I wasn't even looking for stepped into my life and really provided a lot of encouragement and helped direct me on the path towards naturopathy. And so the spark within me was lit again to like start a practice. And when I apprenticed with him for well over a year, and then I started the formal training for naturopathy. And when they told me how many hours a week I would need to set aside for this, I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way that's going to work. And so I had this time, and then I had an experience where I woke up with in a panic attack again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I recognize this. I know I had actually been kind of heading probably in a lighter stage of adrenal fatigue for a while, but it was that panic attack where I was like, oh, I know what this is. And I know I don't want to mess with this again.
That's really
And
interesting, because I think being able to recognize it once you understand like the signs that your body is telling you.
yeah.
So just to back up for a second. So that's really interesting though, that your own experience, of kind of going through this burnout and kind of reevaluation of like your life and what you potentially needed to change really then led you on a trajectory of wanting to help other people.
Oh, absolutely. I just have that nurturer within myself that I love, especially in a field where like biohacking is a big push, and kind of trying to do all the things to make yourself feel better and to kind of
You can get
uh,
exhausted and stressed from doing all the things, I think.
exactly. And that's, we were going to talk about kind of the biggest mistakes that women and anybody can make, and when they're in this state, is building these complicated routines that feel super fragile, and that if you run out of a supplement and you forget to get something, then you don't feel well, or you feel really tired. We look to that supplement as the reason and the cause, and that might not be it at all.
Right.
And um and like I said, that was kind of the path that I was on the first time around. And the next time when I had the adrenal fatigue, I just had the awareness of that was what caused part of the overwhelm and made me go so deep and take so long to recover. And so this time I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I mean, I still had supplements, but I didn't beat myself up if I forgot it. I really prioritized the restoration time, and I learned to trust what my body was leading me to do, and that I wouldn't go into this needing to rest time without coming back out of it. Like, even if it took me months or whatever, I just decided to trust my body and know that eventually I would have the energy again, and I would have that everything, you know.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about kind of just the basics of, what is kind of this whole, adrenal fatigue, your nervous system. How is this all connected? Because again, it's kind of like a buzzword, out
Sure.
there nowadays, like everyone's talking about it. So I thought we could kind of just give everybody just some basics about it, and then kind of talk about stress also.
Well, absolutely. So, just for starters, adrenal fatigue is a diagnosis that's pretty prevalent in the holistic or natural space. It's maybe not as represented or recognized in the allopathic or Western medicine world. So if you go to your general practitioner and say, I think I'm in adrenal fatigue, they may or may not recognize that or know what you're talking about. So it's important to be um, informed, but also not necessarily hanging onto a diagnosis given to you from somewhere else.
Right.
All the tips and all the things that I talk about are appropriate if you are just feeling mentally exhausted and overwhelmed. You still would totally be able to gain from these tips. But the adrenals are little glands that sit on top of the kidneys, so in the back, kind of towards the lower part of your ribs. And they're responsible for a lot of signaling, especially in the stress hormones. So they release your cortisol, they release your adrenaline. They also are part of the coordinating for your hormones. And they are in charge of that hormone signaling, especially before puberty and after menopause. Um, and that is just to say that when I really love how they are the exact representation of how the emotional impacts the physical. But sometimes that's kind of a new concept for people. But in adrenal fatigue, it's really easy to understand that if you have a lot of stress day to day, day in, day out, and not a lot of breaks from that stress, that the adrenals are having to release cortisol and adrenaline more than and more frequently than they're designed to do. So they become, in a sense, fatigued and
like almost
worn out.
on alert, like you have a constant fire
Exactly.
going off.
And depending on what exactly the hormone signaling is, it can lead you to be wired and tired. Like it's time to go to bed and you've been feeling exhausted all day and you lay down and you just can't go to sleep. You can't rest enough to dip into that deep sleep. Or it can be, it's really hard to get out of bed. So both of those are functions of the adrenals, and they have to do with which part of the adrenal is most active.
Got it. So then if someone is experiencing those types of things over, like, is there a certain period of time that like, hey, this has been going on for like a few weeks, a month, where I'm having trouble sleeping, I'm having trouble getting out of bed, is there a certain duration that you would say someone should kind of reflect and say, hey,
I think by the time somebody is asking themselves those questions, it's probably gone on for quite some time.
Right.
And I would say, even if it is just a few weeks, or even if you're noticing the last few days, like it's never too soon to start to make some adjustments.
Got it.
Although there are different seasons and cycles where we might have a month or so when we have to kind of be on that higher end of activity and drive and stress, just as long as you are mindful that you need to also be balancing that off with restoration and rest and setting the parameters to really, really do that.
Right. So I think that that's a really helpful concept, because I don't know that many people really understand that, what your adrenal glands are doing and how the correlation with stress, like how it works together. And it's like you are in control of that in a way. Like you have the ability to make choices and do things that can really help, your body function without kind of combating itself in a way.
Right. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And I often tell the women I work with, feeling better is a lot closer than you think it is. It's still going to be a journey, and you can be working on this as a practice for a lifelong. And that's what I try to teach them, is lifelong practices, so that you can keep coming back to anytime you feel like you are going a little sideways with your with your stress levels. But really just a few small changes can make a huge difference, and you can be feeling a difference within weeks.
That's fantastic. So let's actually talk about those types of things. So let's first talk about the common mistakes that you see someone making. And so again, as you mentioned, it's like nobody needs to necessarily be like tied to a diagnosis, but like if you are feeling exhaustion and you're trying to remedy that, what do you see people doing that's kind of counterproductive to that?
Well, first off, and I've kind of referenced it already, is looking outside of yourself, like looking for the magic nutrient that's going to give you the energy. Is it a high intensity workout? Is it weight training? Is it, all of these different workout options? Which one is it? They're searching for that answer there too, or even restrictive diets. Those three things were definitely huge things that I looked to my first time around. And the answer actually wasn't there, and created a complex routine that was just even more overwhelming.
Right. And obviously basic eating, whole
Oh,
foods,
sure.
less processed foods, moving your body more. Like we're not saying like those things aren't important. I think what you're saying is kind of trying to go and, put together this like really complex routine, hoping that then that resolves the exhaustion where the routine, where I feel like the routine in itself can be exhausting and then like
Absolutely.
kind of have a spiral effect. So then,
And I was going to say that the nervous system plays a role in that particular mistake. Well, really all of them, but I like to call it active and receptive states. People can use the words sympathetic or parasympathetic. And probably the most common terms that people hear are like fight or flight, the saber tooth's coming after you, and rest and digest. And if you're not getting into that what they call rest and digest space, then your body is not able to absorb the nutrients from a supplement or from a really great whole foods diet. It's taking those workouts and interpreting it as more stress
right.
rather than, and it's not getting the time to like get the benefits out of those things. So I really encourage people to be learning how to work with their nervous system first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it's like the more you layer on, if your body's not in a state to actually benefit from it, you're kind of doing all this work for no potential like benefit. So then
Exactly.
I know you've alluded to some of the tips, but what would you suggest people start with if they're trying to kind of get more energy?
Yeah. So, um, in my online workshop, we go deeper into this, but just to give you like a overview, first thing is to kind of check your mindset. I tell this story often of a friend that I have who has 8 kids that she homeschools. She runs a direct sales business and is on top of it with a food co-op that she runs out of her house. And when I was doing, the research to try and figure out exactly what I needed to do to help people in this space, I asked to talk to her because I'm like, she's a shoo-in for stress, like high stress. And when I asked her that question in our call, she's like, "No, actually, I feel good." And I was like, "What? Okay, now we have a totally different conversation to have." And I was reflecting on times that I've been to her house, that I've seen her. She has time to like have an extended conversation with me, and she doesn't feel stressed. I often go to her house, and she's sitting on her porch with her feet up, talking on the phone. I'm like, she's not making this up. She's not like denying her reality. But I was like, if she can feel that way with all the things that she has going on, then there's something to it. Your outside can be very busy as long as you are understanding that you're not taking lazy days when you stay in bed all day. Those are restorative days, that you put those times and those days in your schedule. And a lot of that is just like knowing that you don't have to be productive every single day, that your worth isn't dependent on those things. And especially, well, I was going to say especially for a mother, but I think for anybody, we're so much more than the work that we do. And being fully present in whatever other roles, relational roles that you have, and is just so much more joyful and like important to have as part of our lives than the to-do list and the whatever is the chores, the appointments, the errands. Like
Right.
those things need a break sometimes.
So really the first step, if I'm hearing you correctly, is to kind of just take a look at your life and like,
Oh, yeah.
what are you doing? And what do you really need to be doing? And what are you kind of choosing to do? Maybe that's filling up space.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In the workshop, we do an exercise on really tapping into your wants. And the first thing I tell them, like, write down anything, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable. If today you want to move to France, but you're really not going to, still put it on the list. Like, it's important to be in the practice of just asking yourself, like, what do I want? Even if it's going to change tomorrow, even if it's just like a reflection of like the argument that I had with somebody and like, I want to have some time to myself, like, or whatever it is. It's still important to give voice to those things, whether you're going to follow through or not. Just tapping into like, what do you want? That's a huge first step for a lot of people.
Yeah. And really evaluating the stuff that you're doing that you what are you doing that's causing you more stress that maybe you can
Mhm.
approach it. Like that mindset piece of it, I think is really interesting in the example that you shared, of the woman that, the perception that she should be stressed because she has this whole huge life of things that she's responsible for, but then it's your perception of your life also.
Mhm.
And so if you're
Absolutely.
going around thinking like, I'm so stressed, I'm so exhausted, I don't have time for anything. Well, what you're thinking about is going to perpetuate, and it's kind of, it seems like, kind of cliche and people kind of talk about it, a lot, but like how you think and speak to yourself, about your own life and your own current situation really matter.
Yeah, we almost put like a value on stress. And one thing my mentor used to say that I go back to a lot, and this, I hope it doesn't come off as harsh, but like sometimes we almost have this desire to be stressed. And like we feed anxieties or worries about the future, and we overfill our schedules, and we do all of these things because there can be just like a badge of honor of like, I'm so busy. I have so many things going on. And that can be driven by so many things. But he really, and I still do this every day. He taught me just like a little mantra, like I deserve peace, love, harmony, and health. I deserve to have this. And like, am I acting that out, or am I acting out of in a sense, a desire to be stressed?
Right.
So,
I love that. Yeah. I deserve peace, love, harmony, and health.
yeah.
That's perfect. That's a really great way to start your day.
Yeah, and
So,
start to program yourself that, like, that is what I deserve and what I can. It's like a little hard for people to take that in, but even just that, well, maybe I deserve, maybe I could.
yeah, I mean, and it's nobody, there's no judgment here. I think all of
Right.
us, existing in this hectic, crazy world that we do, it just becomes like almost automatic. And you kind of get into this space where, well, everybody's working a full-time job and has a side hustle and takes their kids to 5 practices a week and then goes on a vacation. And then you're just like, wait a second, like I'm in this like whirlwind of experiences, but I'm too exhausted to even appreciate participating in them.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to step back. I mean, and part of the reason I called this podcast Soul Aligned CEO is it's really important to me to really kind of share stories of entrepreneurs that are like fully aligned, like
Mhm.
soul, body, mental, emotional, because that's when you really kind of hit that like place where everything is working together, and then that's where the universe kind of rewards that energy. And so this is really great. I really appreciate you sharing those tips.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely, and I really love that you put that together because as you're saying that, I'm realizing the difference, you know, another way of looking at the difference between the first experience with adrenal fatigue and my second experience was the first time I wasn't aligned. I was just like ignoring all these cues from my body and from, the chaos in my life in hopes of someday becoming aligned. And then this time, I did have to make some big decisions about my schedule. At the time, I was homeschooling my kids, and In the homeschooling community, it's like it's a very emotional thing, and it's a huge decision to send your kids back to school. Most people who do send their kids back to school after homeschooling don't talk about it as publicly as they talked about the homeschooling itself. And I was definitely in there. I quietly sent my kids back to school, but it really was the best choice for me because for me to be aligned, I needed to have that white space. I needed to be more in control of having the time to work, but also having the time to rest.
Right. And you're setting that example, for
Yeah. Oh
your
gosh. Yeah.
children too. So that's really wonderful. So let's talk about your course. I know we've kind of shared a little bit of information about it along the conversation, but I want to just let people know, like, really, what is the course? How do they participate? What can they expect to get out of it?
So my course is called The Vibrant Way. It's an online self-guided course. And it's funny because as I was making this course, I had to be really mindful that I was really wanting to help mentally exhausted women who experienced overwhelm so that they, at the very least, could wake up feeling refreshed 5 mornings per week. That's the least that the course will get you. There's like, it's a whole learning a new way of experiencing your life. But I needed to format it so that we were not adding to the overwhelm that these people are already feeling, and to get them to a place quickly where they were able to pull in the information and kind of change that mindset. So one thing I'd love to invite your listeners to do is I have an overcoming overwhelm without complicated self-care routines free webinar. And it kind of gives you like a taste of the vibrant way that they can go through. And one thing that they would take away from that is the first step in creating a little bit more space and a little kind of starting to melt away some of that overwhelm so that bringing on a course like the Vibrant Way feels more manageable and feels like something you could actually do and take in.
Got it.
Beyond that, the format of the Vibrant Way is you get a phase, you get an hour of content at the most at a time and integration weeks in between. And that hour of content is broken down into really small videos. So I tell women if you devote 15 minutes a day, then you'll actually move through the course pretty quickly. But you wouldn't even have to put that much in. You could just be like, I'm watching one video today. So you get to kind of pick how much you're going to engage. They're very, very profound and very potent. And pretty quickly you start to discover ways to get it in, and you keep going back to it because it's bringing so much to your life. So, for example, I had a woman tell me that when her daughter's at soccer practice, she's listening to the course. And I was like, oh, what a great reframe and like a great way to use that time.
Right. So it's self-paced.
It's self-paced. And you still get the content dripped like 1 hour at a time, integration week, another hour. And again, like I said, the longest video is 15 minutes. So most of the videos are a lot shorter. And the practices that you're learning are short, they're easy. A lot of them address things that you're already doing. So like, for example, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, what would you do if you were driving and you got stopped at a stoplight?
If I got stopped at a stoplight, I'm not sure.
You just sit there.
Sit there, yeah.
You just sit there. But now we have
people look
cell
at their
phones. People look at their phones. They try to carry a conversation. They respond to a text.
Yeah, you just kind of zone out usually.
You
back
totally
then.
right, exactly. And so you're going to be. So we still have to. That reality of stopping at a stoplight hasn't changed. We're still going to be doing that. But one thing that you can change is to put a little parameters around picking up that phone. There's probably nothing that you need to see in that 30 seconds where you're waiting for the stoplight. And you would get so much more out of it just by zoning out or letting your brain melt or taking a few deep breaths than inputting your nervous system in your brain with that conversation or that social media post or whatever is going on. So a lot of the practices are like that, things that you're already doing from a different reframe and a different mindset.
I love that. So then, who would you recommend take this course?
I would say any woman who's feeling mentally exhausted, even if it's just kind of the beginning stages and you haven't really been dealing with it for months or years, if you are ready to really look at that and see what parts of yourself are contributing to that, this is an excellent course for that. We go into something that I would kind of call parts work. If you're familiar with parts work with counseling, this is not quite the same, but introducing the idea that we have different parts of ourselves that we use to work that help us be organized and structured and productive. But then there's another part of ourself that loves to lay in bed and indulge and spend hours cooking in the kitchen or whatever it is. Like, I call them the masculine and feminine parts. That obviously my terminology. Lots of people are talking about that, but helping people tap into that, because it was really my feminine part that helped me recover, and like just giving attention to that. And like I mentioned earlier, building trust that she's going to encourage me to rest and rest and rest, but she's not going to make me rest forever.
Right, right. No, that makes sense. So, quick question. So then, does the course like start at certain times throughout each month, or can anybody sign up at any time?
Anybody can sign up at any time. Once you sign up, you have 6 months to complete the course. It's only 5 hours, a little over 5 hours of content, so it's pretty easy to get through that within 6 months. I just put those parameters on around there to give people accountability.
Right.
But another thing that comes with the course is the Vibrant Way community on Instagram, which is a private feed. As soon as you join the course, you're eligible to join the community, and that's a lifetime membership. So we do integration themes each week. You could think of them as a challenge, but I think it's softer to call them
Right.
integration themes. And I do weekly lives on that theme or answering questions. It's also a place where if you're going through the Vibrant Way and you're having questions or you're needing a little bit more one-on-one care, you can have access to me. And then we're there encouraging each other, sharing wins. And it's just all people who have been through that course. So we all kind of are working from a similar framework and just showing how it evolves even long after you've taken the course.
Right. Well, that's all fantastic. And so let's talk a little bit about how people can get in contact with you. You mentioned Instagram. Do you have an Instagram people can follow?
Yes, it is flex.health.with.Maura. So flex health with more, but a period between each of those words. To go directly to the Vibrant Way, my website is called thevibrantway.com.
Okay.
And that's exactly where you can sign up for it. And then I'll also give you a link for that free workshop so that people can get familiar with that and kind of start their journey.
I really appreciate that. So so we'll put all of the contact information, how to check out the free workshop, and then how to enroll in the course and really just get more information about Maura and all the wonderful things that she's doing to help spread awareness, and really just help everybody feel vibrant. I love the name of that. Like that's so purposeful and beautiful. So I really appreciate you being here today. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So I just want to thank everyone for listening. I hope that you have found this episode informative and interesting, and maybe you're even inspired. And until next time, I wish you much peace, love, and joy as you pursue being soul aligned.